So, over the past few years, survival games have been slowly climbing to the top of one of my most enjoyed genres. There have just been so many great titles that I've thoroughly enjoyed, gotten a ton of entertainment and fun memories out of. At this point, I am actively interested in trying pretty much any decent looking survival game that comes out going forward. I just like the genre that much. And as luck would have it, there's a handful of them coming this year. So, let's go ahead and take a look. So, first up on this list is Atomfall. Now, while most of the games that we'll be covering today have some form of co-op or multiplayer, this is one of the few that is single player only. However, I wanted to still mention it because A, I think this looks quite interesting, and B, it's actually the only game that has a confirmed actual release month and date as of this recording. Everything else in this list is planned for 2025, but no exact launch day, or that is to be determined as of now. Now that out of the way, single player or not, I think Atomfall looks actually quite cool. It also gets bonus marks from me for being the latest title from Rebellion, a studio who time and time again has made games that I really enjoyed. They might not be the biggest blockbusters out there, the most polished, the most fine-tuned, or the most mass appeal, but have nevertheless brought me quite a lot of entertainment. So Atomfall is set in an alternate history 1960s, where the wind-scale nuclear disasters turn much of northern England into this radioactive quarantine zone. Now this is inspired by the real-world wind-scale events that actually happened, but in an alternate what-if scenario with a little supernatural twist added on top. So we're going to be traversing this lake district of northern England, uncovering mysteries about the quarantine zone along with the people who inhabit it. This locale is made up of a series of interconnected areas with rolling green hills, lush valleys, rural villages, and plenty of hidden secrets to discover. Each area is going to have its own distinct theming and points of interest. We got a small town that was taken over by the heavy-handed British military and their deadly robots, the surrounding wilderness that's dotted with camps that are full of bandits and cultists, and various underground bunkers and other areas patrolled by these autonomous machines and radiated feral creatures. Other noteworthy areas include this abandoned rail yard, a derelict stone quarry, verdant rolling hills, secret bandit hideouts, and bunkers that lead to the British Atomic Research Division of underground layers. As you explore through the areas, you're going to acquire leads, either by speaking to NPCs you come across or just discovering clues in the environment, which will direct you to new objectives, opportunities, and stories, all of which are fully open-ended as you are able to pursue them in whatever order you please. There is, of course, plenty of combat to be had should you desire. This can be approached in multiple ways. You've got guns and other ranged weapons, as well as melee brawls and stealth takedowns. And in fact, the stealth system is apparently fleshed out enough with plenty of hiding and distraction tools at your disposal that the game can evidently be completed without killing a single enemy, which is kind of interesting. You'll acquire weapons, supplies, and materials by scavenging through the environment as you explore, collecting anything useful as you move through the game's various areas. The scavenging is also going to play a big role into the various survival systems, so you're going to collect resources and scraps to craft weapons, consumables, and other tools. And while ranged is an option, as we mentioned, they have made note that ammunition is going to be scarce in the game, requiring you to really pick your shots carefully. There's going to be power progression as you're able to upgrade your weapons, along with level up with a skill and perk tree, providing different playstyle enhancements. And they have another interesting survival mechanic with this heart rate system. So engaging in combat, sprinting, and kicking enemies all increase your heart rate, and if you overexert yourself, it's actually going to result in darkened vision and muffled hearing, kind of an additional twist on a basic stamina system, requiring you to pace your actions if you don't want to deal with that debuff. I mean, hey, look, I really like Rebellion. Like I said, they've made games that I've quite enjoyed, and this looks like it could potentially be another one to add to the list, so excited to give it a go. Atomfall is set to release on March 27th for PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. Okay, so as mentioned, as of right now, that is actually the only survival game that has a firm release month and date. The next grouping that we're going to take a look at here are all officially slated to come out in 2025. We are just not certain of the date and or the month as of today's recording. Starting this with Dune Awakening, a game that I could probably already talk about for hours on end, as I've been actively following its development and any information released on the project. Many of you will be familiar with its developer Funcom for their previous survival game, Conan Exiles, although in my eyes, Funcom will always be the studio who brought us The Secret World, a relatively small but nevertheless unique MMO from back in 2012. So Dune Awakening is actually described as a survival sandbox MMO. The game was in my MMO list, but it's also here in my survival list. The MMO tag is mostly referred referring to the game's seamless open world, where you will supposedly be able to run into literally any and every single other person playing the game, as they are purporting to host the entire thing on one massive server. We don't have server shards, you're not separated from people. Everyone playing the game is all playing in the same play space, apparently using some fancy new tech. We'll see if that does not end up in a lot of terrible lag and rubber banding. Who knows? Maybe they'll solve the issue. But beyond those MMO elements and like the fact that they've got RPG-inspired progression and leveling, it is a survival game through and through with all of the genre's expected systems and features. So here's a streamlined overview of what we know about the game so far. You're going to start off by picking out from 1 of 4 character classes, each come with a baseline combat role and skill that you have access to, although this is something that as you progress through the game, you'll be able to pick and choose whatever you want from any of the class skill trees. This is just your starting point. The intro tutorial, beyond taking you through the basics of combat, gathering, and crafting, also introduces you to the game's spice mechanic, which is essentially a form of magic in the Dune universe, at least how they're implementing it here in this game. In the opening hours, you're going to be spending your time clearing small enemy camps, constructing your very first base, visiting trading hubs with NPCs, and also other players will be around, and you'll be exploring the games at various points of interest, either by yourself or with a group, doing things like participating in world events and seeing the things that there are to see. Those things will include, you got larger enemy outposts that are tucked away in many of the rock islands all among the planet's surface. Go in, clear a whole bunch of enemies, collect any loot that they drop, open up some chests. You got crashed ships that will fall from the sky, rewarding valuables should you happen to scavenge them before anyone else does. Of course, it wouldn't be Dune without sandworms. They are there, a constant threat as you are out in the open, and the TLDR of this is, the more noise you make while walking on the sands or driving on the sands or doing anything on the sands, the more attention that you draw, eventually causing a worm to erupt from the sands and then chasing you down. These can and will kill you if they catch up to you. You got enemy police forces that scan the planet's surface at night. In these patrolling ships with their massive spotlights, if you happen to get spotted, they call in reinforcements to try to hunt you down. And then there are the Echo Labs. This is basically the game's take on dungeons, said to be more akin to something like the shelters in Fallout or the dungeons in the Skyrim. They're elaborate underground facilities that bring with them a lot of enemies, elites, and bosses, and a bit more visual variety than what is found in the sands above. Progression through the game is done in a few different ways. You got character progression with the typical RPG systems, kill enemies, complete quests, gain XP, level up in the process. Leveling gives you points to spend into skill trees, unlocking various active and passive abilities. Then you've got area or zone progression that's actually tied to your level of vehicle advancement. So basically how this works is that the early game, you're in the southern portion of the starter zone called Haga Basin. Here, you're going to be doing everything that we mentioned above as you work towards unlocking the ability to craft your first sand bike. And this is actually required for you to leave that southern area, traversing this large expanse of sand that is only possible on a bike, because otherwise, if you try traversing it on foot, the worm is going to kill you. Once you get the sand bike, or if you can hop onto one of your friends, that lets you leave the southern zone into Haga Basin proper, and this is where a bulk of like the first 100 hours of the game will be taking place. It'll include everything that we've covered as well as a whole lot more. There will be more enemy outposts, more dungeons, more world events, more sandworms, etc., etc. You'll spend a whole lot of time here up until you get to the point of constructing an ornithopter, the flying vehicle, and at that point you can finally leave Haga Basin and enter the endgame zone of the deep desert. This is where you're going to take part in the endgame spice harvesting mechanic, which also comes with large-scale open-world PvP, what they are referring to as combined arms. This is like Battlefield or PlanetSide inspired and similar encounters, with a potentially massive number of players engaged in melee brawls, range combat, throwing out skills, tossing grenades, and vehicles, both land and air variety mixed in as well. This all sounds really cool, however, up until now, we've not really seen it in action beyond a few carefully curated, cinematically framed clips here and there. And all of that is just scratching the surface. Like I said, I could probably talk about this game for hours. I am very much looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to clearing the enemy camps and dungeons. I think I'll really enjoy it. I like their survival mechanics with you having to like avoid the sun and stay hydrated. I like the base building. It seems simple but well done. I like the twist that they have to the Dune universe, like your Fremkit backpack or replacing heavy attacks with the slow attacks to pierce shields. I like the environmental stuff, like these massive sandstorms that you're going to have to deal with and get in cover when they come by, or the patrolling security ships. I mean, all this stuff looks looks really great. Now, there's definitely some issues. Early on, it seems like performance isn't looking too great. I mean, you even saw this in their most recently released trailer that just came out earlier yesterday. Other lingering concerns include that there's still a lot of clunk here, like clunky animations, pretty slow looking combat. And yeah, I mean, I want to see more, and I hope they continue to fine tune and improve it. The game certainly clearly has some jank to it and some rough edges, but it is jank that I'm willing to suffer through if the rest of it delivers and is fun, which is what I'm hoping for. Dune Awakening is slated for an early 2025 release, although here we are now in February with no month even nailed down as of yet, so we'll see if they happen to hit that timeline. The highly acclaimed Subnautica is getting a sequel this year, this being the underwater survival adventure game set on an alien ocean world. If you have thalassophobia though, probably best to avoid this one, which frankly, totally justifiable fear. Like, the ocean is in many ways very terrifying, and that's coming from one of the crazies who steps onto a board and rides waves, knowing that sharks are probably not too far away. But the ocean is scary, okay? Doesn't matter how much time I spend in it. Now, I only dabbled in the original game, but I was quite impressed with what I saw. As for the sequel, here are some details. The game will be set on an entirely new world with a whole new story. You play as a pioneer exploring a recently discovered distant planet, but something isn't quite right, and you find that out shortly after arriving. The ship's AI, however, insists that you carry on the mission despite the whole place being legitimately way too dangerous for any humans to survive, but maybe you become more than human, huh? So they're going to offer both solo and online multiplayer co-op with up to 3 friends. You're going to be exploring things like mysterious ruins, building custom bases, and adventuring into the deepest, darkest ravines, crafting various tools to help in your adventure. Beyond the basics, you've got things like a scanner and a flashlight. You also find recipes for more advanced tools, equipment, and even submersibles to travel in. Bases are going to be more customizable with an overhauled building system. They've got more diverse biomes, from towering underwater cliffs to lush coral fields, many different places to visit, each teeming with its own diverse ecosystem and unique creatures. And there's the entire system of studying creatures, from the smallest fish to the biggest leviathans. You're going to use a scanner to learn basics and a biosampler to study them further, and then taking those discoveries to evolve your own genetics, i.e. powers and mutations. Subnautica 2 is planned to release in the Steam Early Access sometime later this year. Renown is a game that I've seen described as a medieval Rust with chivalry-like combat. All right, consider my interest piqued. According to its developer, Renown takes the most enjoyable and popular aspects from contemporary open-world survival games, which include building, progression, and social politics. These are then combined with close-quarters, skill-based combat to create an immersive and engaging multiplayer experience. So players are going to start out with nothing, gather resources, and then go on to build a kingdom and fight to survive in hopes of becoming renowned across the lands. I get it. I get the connection. Good job, guys. At its core, Renown is a first-person medieval fighting game with a strong emphasis on competitive skill-based combat in addition to all of its survival mechanics. Its features include gathering and crafting, of course, along with hunting wildlife. You got base building at a variety of scales, starting with a small shack up into building an entire sprawling fortress. There will be raiding, as you are able to attack and level opponents' structures while engaging in fast-paced PvP conflict. They got group systems for making claims, taking titles, giving ranks, and more. You'll even be able to customize your own clan's colors and emblems. You'll take shelter and safe zones where you can trade with vendors, duel other players, form alliances, or maybe make some foes in general chat. That's always a fun time. There'll be server progression and wipe systems for long-term replayability, starting things over, and they're promising tools for community hosts to help tailor your own servers with future plans for extensive modability. Now, the game has been in development for a few years now and has been running regular playtest, and from what I've seen online, looks like it's shaping up pretty nicely. They are planning an early access release at some point this year. Looking forward to checking it out. Terminator Survivors is a fairly unique sounding survival game. Whether it is solo or in co-op with up to 4 people, you're going to play as a group of survivors in this open world return to the iconic Terminator universe set in the aftermath of Judgment Day. A nice little glimpse into one of our potentially nightmarish future timelines. It's certainly on the table. So the game takes place 4 years after the day humanity nearly perished. Emerging from a shelter, you're attempting to re-establish some semblance of society, tasked with scouring the surrounding land for materials, information, other survivors, and key resources to build a base of operations for your group. You'll meet iconic characters of the franchise as well as some original ones while exploring what they call a meticulously crafted world set in a post-apocalyptic future. Explore the open world, collecting materials and survivors to advance your home base, all while having to avoid the pursuit of an indestructible threat. There is combat with weapons and tools for you to sneak up at close range. However, stealth is often best advised, what with Skynet's machines and scavengers lurking about, and there's going to be a main story questline as you learn more about what happened on Judgment Day and thereafter. I mean, this could be cool. Video games based on popular IPs are always quite a gamble, but I won't knock it until we try it. Terminator Survivors was originally planned to launch actually in 2024, but then last July they pushed the date back, so 2025 is when it's going to be coming, so the last we heard. Okay, so the rest of the games here could possibly come out in 2025, but as of this moment, we've got no confirmation that that's going to happen. So while many of these likely won't release until 2026 or later, there is a possibility that a few of them could get a release date in the coming months and then launch later in the year. Either way, each of these games I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on. Light No Fire is the next big game from No Man's Sky developer Hello Games, and you can clearly see the lineage with that initial trailer basically looking like No Man's Sky Fantasy Edition. In fact, that starting clip of them swimming and then emerging out of the water, that looks exactly like No Man's Sky to my untrained eye. But hey, I mean, a fantasy spin on that formula, especially if they improve the combat, which they said they're going to, I will play that. We've got a few early details on the project. They've said that this game is more ambitious than their last one, despite it taking place on a single planet rather than an entire universe. Their goal here is to deliver much more depth and detail to their explorable space and feel less shallow than No Man's Sky's planet-side exploration. Nevertheless, it's going to be quite large. They've claimed to have built an Earth-sized game, an entire planet that's as varied as a universe, with mile-high mountains, from the top of which you will see rivers, canyons, oceans, and continents beyond, all of which can be traveled to and explored. Sean has referred to Light No Fire as, quote, the first real open world, something without boundaries, with us getting some glimpse of that in the trailer. It was also said that everyone is going to be able to play together, alluding to this being a shared world game where you will see other people running around. And finally, Hello Games says that they want to bring the depth of a role-playing game to the freedom of a survival sandbox with Light No Fire. While the focus of the reveal centered on the scope of the planet, the final game is going to have many traditional RPG features, from character creation, playing through a sprawling fantasy story, gear and progression systems, a variety of fantasy enemies and bosses to take on, and we're even going to be flying around on dragons and other creatures. Look, in spite of the floundering start that No Man's Sky had, we have seen such an impressive level of post-launch support from the studio. That leaves my confidence pretty high on their upcoming game. And again, if nothing else, a fantasy No Man's Sky on a huge planet with dragons and RPG character progression and exploring and dungeon diving, if the combat is actually improved, I will play that without question, right? Outward, this is a rather unique fantasy RPG from 2019 that I played and thoroughly enjoyed. The game just had a ton of charm and interesting systems that really set it apart from others in the genre. In their upcoming sequel, they will be building upon that while incorporating even more survival systems and mechanics. Now, one of the coolest features that I recall from the first game was the simple fact that your backpack was an actual physical item, which you would load and then pick up and put down at your discretion. And you would want to do this for a variety of reasons given various circumstances. It might sound silly, but it really stood out to me at the time and was an interesting consideration while playing through the game. This is also one of those games that firmly plant you in the role of an adventurer traversing a dangerous world. You are not this protagonist ordained and protected by the gods. In fact, the top line description of Outward 2 says, "You are only human and the life of an adventurer is perilous. It's not just creatures and brigands that threaten you. Hunger, illness, and the elements are all part of your journey into the vast regions of Arai. But with sufficient preparation, even ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Your victories will be earned, not handed to you." Dude, I just love it. All right, key features of Outward 2 include a harsh difficulty that rewards preparation and ingenuity, high replay value with multiple branching storylines, constant auto-saving, which means you can't go back on your choices or failures. There's dynamic defeat scenarios will keep you on your toes, a simple but rich crafting system, loads of content to explore across areas, equipment, combat skills, and spells, a responsive and flexible combat system, multi-step ritualistic magic with plenty of hidden effects, and you can play either solo or cooperatively online and or with split screen. Yeah, this is going to be great, hands down, without a question. I really like the first game and this is looking just even better. Cannot wait. Under a Rock is a survival title that I just recently learned about, and I'm so glad I did because I love the way this thing looks. So the basic rundown is this is a procedural open world survival crafting game for 1 to 10 players. You're going to explore a mysterious, colorful island populated by exotic creatures, oversized wildlife, and curious natives, unveiling its secrets, building a base, surviving hostile environments, and even more dangerous nights. The whole thing is set in the early 19th century, with you playing as an explorer stranded in a strange world, navigating dark caves, underwater environments, and a vast, diverse overland, all filled with unique challenges, enemies, and resources. There's the typical assortment of crafting, building, harvesting, farming, fishing, exploring, and fighting. There will be base building with a large variety of assets to make your dream cottage, home, village, or even a city. In fact, they say that there's no limit to the base size, which is pretty interesting. And you will fight, tame, breed, and even ride a variety of the game's creatures. Any of those tamed, in fact, actually have useful mechanics benefiting you in exploration and combat and even in base management and cooking. Beyond that, I mean, hey, I think this game looks cool. Like, I like the visuals, pretty appealing to me. So there you go, Under a Rock. Next up here is a game that totally wasn't inspired by Horizon. Nope, not at all. This is a super original, brand new idea with a world setting and character designs pulled directly out of the imaginations of its developers. No, it's a Horizon spinoff, right? Like, but no matter the inspiration, Light of Motiram actually looks decent enough for me to want to give it a go. Also, to be honest, with how Sony has been canceling its live service games left and right recently, the Horizon MMO has already been axed. There's a decent chance that the Horizon survival game that they're making, that Guerrilla's making, that might get canceled as well, in which case, this is going to be our next best option. So Light of Motiram is an open world survival crafting game with action combat, set in a world reclaimed by nature and ruled by giant mechanical beasts. Players will explore a variety of landscapes, uncover ancient secrets, and forge bonds with powerful mech animals, totally original dino-like robots. Some key features include a seamless open world where you traverse grasslands, deserts, forests, and mountains. There's a variety of weapons you'll use in action combat versus a range of mechanical foes. This looks very Monster Hunter-ish in that capacity. You'll also be fighting alongside mech animals, little companions, over 100 to collect with unique designs and roles that will aid you in battle. Survival crafting mechanics, you got base building and management, unpredictable weather systems, invasions, and there will be co-op play as you can group up with other players at any time. For as much as it is clearly a Horizon knockoff, I will check this thing out. Blackfrost is another one absolutely worth keeping an eye on. This is the sequel to The Long Dark, an indie darling and much acclaimed game. While the original was single player and narrative focused, Blackfrost takes that foundation and adds on to it with a full-on survival co-op experience. The developers describe this game by saying it is the evolution of the survival sandbox, refining every aspect of the original and introducing co-op to the formula. The game is set in the northern industrial city of Harmont, surrounded by a majestic, rugged wilderness. You can choose to either survive as a lone wanderer in a frozen wasteland city, town, forest, and farm, or work together as a group of survivors in whatever shelter you make for yourselves. They are calling this the next generation of survival RPG, evolving every aspect of the formula to its 2.0 iteration, setting the table for the next generation. Beyond traditional considerations of managing things like your health, stamina, and consumables, they've also got this will to live system that adds elements of psychological survival into the mix. There are new hazards, from urban risk to the deep freeze to extreme weather events, aurora storms, and the radioactive Blackfrost. This sequel adds a perma-life system set to turn every death into a new adventure. You're going to accumulate new risks and fears for your survivor as you move through the world and succumb to its hazards. They do have the original permadeath as an option as well, should you choose it. I mean, hey man, they are certainly selling this thing very hard, calling it the next generation of survival games. But given the success and the praise for the original, I'm keeping an open mind, and this does look quite good, so I hope they deliver. Okay, so beyond that bulk of the list, I got some honorable mentions here. First up is Rooted, the post-apocalyptic survival game that I've been hearing about for a few years now. Every bit of gameplay that I've seen does seem interesting. I think this looks neat, but I've got no clue how close or not this is to actually launching. Last time I saw it, it was still in alpha testing, and it seems very likely that it could still be a long ways away from release, but maybe we will hear otherwise this year. They have been running tests periodically though, from what I can tell, so it is something that you could get your hands on and play in the early stages if you manage to get an invite. Stormforge is this rather unique looking survival title. The art style and visuals certainly set it apart from some others. I mean, they are going really hard on this, kind of this like hand-drawn comic book direction. And while I suspect this might be a turnoff to some people, I appreciate the decision and the dedication to it. At least it's something different, right? They actually are evidently planning to release this year, so if you like how this looks, definitely keep an eye out. And then there is Ark 2, which I mean, I don't know, maybe this is happening. Ark is such a strange phenomenon. This game is simultaneously something that is never spoken about in any of the online and or gaming circles that I inhabit, but I understand at the same time it is pretty pretty darn popular. I mean, lots of people play this game. But with the development studio's ever-growing list of shady moves and decisions, I just really don't know what to think about the sequel. Like, apparently they were already supposed to have launched Arc 2, but couldn't get the funding to continue its development, so instead they decided to shut down the official servers of the first game, repackage it, and sell it again, but with a fraction of the content, then later asking players to have to re-buy that content that they already had access to in the first game, but couldn't play on the official servers. Now, they could play on private servers and whatnot, but nevertheless, like, it's just all crazy. I might be butchering, like, the explanation and order of events here, but it was something along those lines from what I recall. I mean, so at this point, yeah, I don't know, maybe Arc 2 happens. I'm not counting on it, but hey, I mean, I guess at least Vin Diesel is happy, right? He got his paycheck for that trailer that they released. Now, one last additional shout out that I want to give here is to some of the currently active early access games that are probably getting major updates and or a full 1.0 release sometime this year. Now, the list of those titles is very long, but just some that are at the top for me personally. So Enshrouded, this was probably one of my favorite games full stop last year. It's been getting fairly regular updates and is expected to be receiving even more in 2025. I've already done a few playthroughs, really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to going again at their next major update. Valheim is also an all-time favorite, even though the pace of updates for this one has been rather slow. I cannot deny the amount of charm, wonder, and immersion that the game delivered on, and definitely when 1.0 happens, I will be diving back in. And then there's Project Zomboid. This is just such a unique and interesting survival game. I've seen so many cool stories and moments here on YouTube. It's kind of strange though, because the game's been in early access for well over 10 years. Not that it really matters, like 1.0 or not, this game is much beloved as it in whatever official version state it is in. Yeah, so all of these games, great already, and they are likely only going to be getting better throughout the course of 2025. Good stuff. All right, so there you go. That about does it for our look at some of the new survival titles planned and potentially coming in 2025. Lot to look forward to here. Hope you enjoyed the list. Let me know if there's anything that I missed in the comments below. Anything else for me to keep an eye on. Always happy to hear about and learn about new games, but that does it for today. Thank you as always for watching. See y'all next time. Take it easy.